Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. Before this story starts, there is one detail I want you to listen for. When somebody starts calling your support the bare minimum while treating your boundaries like an inconvenience, that is not ambition. That is entitlement wearing nice clothes. In this one, the warning sign was not the cheating by itself. It was how she slowly rewrote every sacrifice as something she was owed. Pay attention to that shift, because once a person starts talking like your help belongs to them, the breakup is usually already in motion. My name is Malcolm Reed, and the night my girlfriend told me she was leaving me for a real man, I was standing in my own kitchen, holding a paper bag of still warm lemon pepper wings from the carryout she liked on Greenmount. It was late October in Baltimore, the kind of cold that sneaks in off the harbor and makes old windows whisper. I remember that because I had just nudged the thermostat up 1 degree before she walked in. I was thinking about being considerate. She was thinking about ending us. I did not know that yet. I just knew she looked too composed for a Tuesday. I am not the kind of man people notice first. I am 6 feet even, dark-skinned, broad in the shoulders, and I have a face barbers always call serious, even when I am in a good mood. I work as a senior compliance analyst for a hospital network, which means my whole job is noticing patterns other people miss and cleaning up quiet messes before they become lawsuits. I like order. I like receipts. I keep my bills in blue folders and my winter socks rolled together in pairs. My girlfriend, Asha Benton, used to joke that I organized my pantry like I expected an inspection. Before this gets any deeper, tell me in the comments right now, if you were helping build somebody's future, would you see it as love or as a risk? And if stories like this pull you in, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Asha was the opposite of me in all the ways that looked exciting from the outside. She was warm where I was reserved, quick where I was careful, magnetic a room without trying very hard. She spoke with her whole face. She liked big earrings, little notebooks, and expensive candles she claimed smelled like grown decisions. When we met, she worked in university advancement at Morgan State, and she had this habit of tapping the edge of her coffee cup 3 times before saying something honest. The first time I noticed it, we were at a diner near Charles Village splitting peach cobbler at 1 a.m. We met at my cousin's retirement party from the fire department, of all places. It was in a church fellowship hall in West Baltimore, with folding chairs, baked mac and cheese, and somebody's uncle arguing about the Ravens near the punch bowl. I had gone because my mother said family matters were not optional. Asha had gone because she knew my cousin's wife through a sorority service event. She was wearing a rust-colored dress and carrying her heels in one hand by the end of the night. She beat me at spades and laughed when I accused her of bluffing with a face too innocent to trust. We started small. Saturday breakfast at Sip and Bite. Long walks around Druid Hill Park when the weather was decent. Debates over whether old Luther or new R&B made better cooking music. She liked scrambled eggs cooked hard. I thought that was a little tragic, but I kept that opinion to myself. By month 4, she had a drawer at my row house in Reservoir Hill. By month 9, she had a key. I did not rush it. She did. She said I felt solid, and at 36, solid sounded better to me than exciting. Exciting had already cost me enough in earlier years. She told me she wanted an MBA a year into our relationship. We were at a quiet Ethiopian restaurant off North Avenue, and she slid her phone across the table to show me a spreadsheet called Exit Velocity. That was her phrase for everything back then. Exit Velocity. She wanted out of fundraising, out of taking notes in meetings where other people got credit, out of renting apartments within walls and laundry in the basement. She wanted strategy, executive titles, boardrooms. I respected that. I admired it, actually. My own mother had worked 30 years at the post office with feet that ached every winter. Ambition did not scare me. What I missed was the edge in it. Asha did not talk about learning. She talked about arriving. She wanted a top program in Chicago, D.C., or New York. She wanted the network, the new circles, the language of power. I am tired of always being adjacent to people making decisions, she said, stabbing a collard green with more force than necessary. I want to be in a room where the room gets picked. I laughed because the sentence was dramatic, and she grinned. But underneath that grin was hunger sharp enough to cut with. I mistook it for drive. Sometimes those are cousins, not twins. I made my first decision right there. I could have told her the truth, which was that I believed in her, but did not think I should bankroll a dream that expensive unless we had clearer terms. Instead, I said I would help. Not because she begged. She did not. She just looked tired, and I knew what student debt had done to my older sister's life. I told myself this was what building together looked like. I had savings, no children, a paid-off car. I owned my house. I thought generosity, handled with maturity, made love sturdier. That was my first mistake. I treated support like it could replace clarity. She got into Kellogg. The acceptance email came on a rainy March afternoon, and she screamed so loud in my kitchen that my upstairs smoke detector chirped in protest. We danced on the cracked tile in our socks. I bought Prosecco. She called her mother in Prince George's County and cried. I called my brother and said, "She did it." That night we ate crab cakes from a place too expensive for a Wednesday and talked about Evanston as if it were a chapter already written. She said we were a team. She said nobody had ever believed in her the way I did. I believe that too. Tuition was not the only thing. That is what people do not understand when they hear a story like this and imagine one dramatic check. Support is usually a web. I covered the tuition gap after scholarships. I paid a deposit on her apartment near campus because Chicago landlords wanted money like they were auctioning the keys. I added her as an authorized user on one of my cards for emergencies. I kept paying her car note because a Honda was still in both our names from when her credit had been shaky. I told myself these were temporary bridges. Bridges feel noble until somebody starts building a palace on top of them. The first semester was hard, but hopeful. She called me from the library with her voice lowered to a whisper, talking about operations models, recruiting dinners, classmates who had worked in consulting and private equity and acted like they had invented confidence. I visited twice before Thanksgiving. Evanston felt clean and windy and expensive. On one trip, we walked by the lake in coats too thin for the weather, and she tucked her arm in mine and said, "When I graduate, I'm going to make all of this worth it." I believed her because I wanted to. Belief can be a kind of vanity. There were warning signs even then, not dramatic ones. Little things. She started correcting my phrasing when I talked about work, as if my hospital job suddenly sounded provincial beside her new world. She laughed at my winter coat and said I dressed like a responsible uncle. She wanted me to come to a mixer, and then spent most of it floating toward people with startup ideas and polished teeth. When I told her one guy seemed full of himself, she shrugged and said, "At least he has presence." That word sat with me all night. Presence. I knew what she meant, and I knew I did not fit it. By January, her schedule had become a wall. Everything was recruiting, travel, dinners, conferences, just one more networking thing. She no longer called at night unless she was in an Uber between places. I learned to track her mood by the quality of her pauses. When she was warm, she asked about my mother's blood pressure or whether I had fixed the loose banister in the front hall. When she was distant, she said my name like a reminder. I started checking the weather in Chicago before I checked my own. That is how love can make a fool out of a grown man, without him noticing. One Saturday in February, I took the early Southwest flight to Midway because she had sounded wrung out all week, and I thought surprising her with groceries and homemade turkey chili would feel like care. I made my second important decision that morning. I could have texted first. I could have announced myself and spared both of us the scene that followed. Instead, I wanted to believe I was still welcome enough not to need permission. I took the train north, lugging a duffel bag and a plastic container wrapped in 2 grocery sacks, and let myself into the apartment with the key she told me to keep. I heard her laughing before I saw her. It was not the laugh itself that stopped me in the doorway. It was how easy it sounded, how unguarded. Asha was at the small kitchen island in leggings and one of my old college sweatshirts, though she had rolled the sleeves up to make it look stylish. Across from her stood a man I had never seen, tall and smooth-skinned. with a camel coat fold over one arm and the relaxed posture of someone already certain he belonged. He was slicing limes with my knife. My knife, in the apartment I had paid to secure. She turned first and nearly dropped her glass. "Malcolm?" She said my name like a child caught reaching for a hot pan. The man looked at me, then at her, then gave a small smile that had too much rehearsal in it. "You must be Malcolm," he said. "I'm Andre." No last name. Just Andre, as if I was expected to know the rest. I set the chili down on the counter more carefully than I felt. "Looks like you all are settled in," I said. Asha rushed into motion, talking too fast about project teams and classmates, and stopping by before a study dinner. Andre Hall, I later learned, was from Detroit, 39, formerly in brand strategy, currently started what he called a culture-forward luxury logistics company, which I still think means he knew how to talk around empty space. He had a barber-cut beard, a watch that flashed without being tacky, and a voice trained to sound amused even when he was insulting somebody. That first day, he kept smiling at me like we were two reasonable men in an awkward but manageable misunderstanding. I hated him on sight for that, not because he was there, because he acted as if my confusion was a detail to be managed. After he left, Asha snapped before I even asked a question. "You cannot just pop up on me like that," she said, arms folded, one hand gripping her own elbow. "I came to see my girl," I said, "with groceries, with food. That is not the point." It was cold in that apartment, radiator heat humming under the windows, but I felt sweat gather at my temples. I asked who Andre really was. She said he was a classmate, then a collaborator, then someone who actually understands where I am headed. That phrasing sat there between us like a splinter. Where I am headed. I did not accuse her of cheating that day, because the truth is I was not ready to hear either answer. If she denied it, and I believed her, I would look foolish. If she admitted it, I would have to act, and I was not prepared to lose the future I had paid for in installments. So I did what many embarrassed people do. I made myself a little smaller. I told her I should have texted first. I told her I just missed her. She softened enough to hug me, but it felt like hugging somebody at a funeral. Formal, careful, already parting. After that visit, everything turned transactional. She called when she needed something practical. A flight, a wire, advice on negotiating summer housing for an internship in New York. She swore was essential. Our old conversations disappeared. No more joking about my aunt's church hats. No more asking me to read over her presentations because she liked how I cut unnecessary words. She still said love you sometimes, but it sounded scheduled, like the dentist reminding me about a cleaning. I started taking longer routes home from work, so I would not walk straight into the choir of my house with all that false hope still buzzing in me. In March, she invited me to a gala in Chicago for Black business students and alumni. I almost said no because I was tired of being introduced as a dependable boyfriend from back home, but I went because part of me still believed showing up mattered. The ballroom was all candlelight and expensive perfume, and men whose shoes looked like they had never seen weather. Asha wore a silver dress with a low back and looked so beautiful it made me angry. Not at her exactly. At myself for still being vulnerable to beauty after everything had already started to rot. I saw the shift in real time that night. It happened in little social edits. She introduced Andre to everybody with stories. She introduced me with credentials. This is Malcolm. He works in healthcare compliance. That was true, but stripped of all the things that made me a person. Andre got laughter. I got bullet points. Then near the bar, I heard her tell a woman from a consulting firm, Malcolm is sweet, but he thinks security is the same as leadership. She said it lightly, almost smiling. The woman laughed into her wine. Asha did not know I heard. I stood there holding club soda like a fool. The actual breakup came 2 weeks later in Baltimore in my kitchen, with the lemon pepper wings cooling through the bag. She had flown down for what she called an honest conversation. That phrase should have warned me. Honest conversations rarely come with a carry-on. She sat on the stool by the counter, crossed one leg over the other, and looked around my kitchen like she was already remembering it from a distance. "I do not want to drag this out," she said. "Andre and I are together." She let the sentence settle, watching me absorb it. I asked the only question my pride could manage. Since when? She pressed her lips together. Since February, if you need a date. Need a date? Like I was filling out a form. I leaned against the sink because I suddenly felt too heavy for my own knees. She kept talking, and I remember almost none of it clearly except one sentence because it split my life in half. He moves like a real man, Malcolm. He is not afraid to take up space. That was it. Not cheating. Not even leaving. That phrase, real man, it reached back through every sacrifice and tried to make me smaller. I asked whether she had come for honesty or for cruelty. She rolled her eyes, which I had never seen her do at me before business school. I am trying to be direct, she said. You are kind, but you are comfortable. Andre is building. He thinks bigger. He understands the level I belong on. I laughed one sharp, ugly sound. The level you belong on? She stood then, paced once, and pointed at the house, the kitchen, the blue kettle on the stove, my whole life. This is nice, Malcolm. Stable. Predictable. But I do not want nice anymore. There is a particular humiliation in standing in a home you work for while somebody explains why it is beneath them. I looked at the backsplash tile we had picked together and remembered how proud she had been of the brass cabinet pulls, how she said the place finally felt like grown people live here. Now it was suddenly too small for her dreams. So what happens next? I asked. She answered quickly, like she had rehearsed this part. She would stay in Chicago through finals. She needed continued help with tuition because she was too close to the finish line to stop now, and the car arrangement should remain unchanged. I stared at her. You expect me to keep funding this? She blinked as if I had asked something childish. You committed to my degree, Malcolm. I committed to us. Do not do that, she snapped. Do not act like my education was only worth supporting if I stayed your girlfriend. There are arguments that sound strong because they borrow the language of principle. This was one of them. For one dangerous second, I almost folded. Then she added, softer and somehow worse. Andre says men who really provide do not get emotional about investments once they have made them. That sentence saved me. I think about that often. Not because it was the cruelest thing she said, though it was close, but because it made the structure plain. This was no longer heartbreak. It was extraction. She wanted the old benefits and the new man. She wanted my money without my place in her life. I remember setting the wing bag down and smoothing the top flat with both hands, so I would not throw it across the room. No, I said, just that. One word. She frowned, as if she had not heard correctly. No, not one more payment. She laughed first, a quick, disbelieving sound. Then her voice sharpened. Do not be petty. This is not petty. This is over. I pulled my phone out right there and opened the card app. I removed her as an authorized user while she was still speaking. She stepped toward me. Malcolm, are you serious? I canceled the auto transfer I had set for her rent support. Then I opened the insurance app and removed her from the policy renewal that was due in 6 days. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Pain was moving through me. But underneath it, something cleaner had arrived. You cannot do this overnight, she said. I absolutely can. I told her I would pay off the current month's car note, since it was already pending. But after that, she needed to refinance or surrender the Honda. I told her I would email her the dates and documentation. She stared at me like I had changed species. So this is who you are? She asked. I almost told her no. This is who you forced me to become. But that would have been too generous. Instead, I said, this is who I am when somebody mistakes kindness for obligation. She tried anger, then tears, then contempt. It was like watching weather roll through fast. She said Andre had been right about me, that I was threatened by bigger energy. She said I wanted a woman who stayed manageable. She said I would regret showing my true colors. I let her talk until she ran out of performance. Then I asked for my house key. She actually looked offended. You do not trust me? Not anymore. She took it off her ring and slapped it onto the counter. The metal skidded and stopped near the fruit bowl. That little sound stays with me even now. She left with her carry-on and did not touch the wings. After the door shut, I stood in my kitchen and looked at the key for maybe 5 full minutes. Then I sat at the table and did something I had not done in years. I cried with my face in both hands, shoulders shaking. Not because I want her back, but because shame is heavy. I felt old, used, ordinary. I kept hearing real man in her voice. My father used to say that people reach for your identity when they cannot justify their behavior. I knew that. Knowing it did not stop it from hurting. The next morning, I went to work anyway. Hospitals do not pause because your personal life catches fire. I reviewed vendor contracts, sent a 3-page memo, and answered 2 calls about audit language. At lunch, I went out to the loading dock with my coffee because I could not bear small talk in the break room. Then I did the practical things grief hates and respects. I called the bank. I called the insurance company. I emailed the car lender. I forwarded documentation to Asha in one clean message with bullet points, deadlines, and no emotional language. Administrative mercy has limits. So does mine. Andre called me 3 days later from a Chicago number I did not recognize. That annoyed me immediately. Men like him never think silence applies to them. He opened with that velvet tone people use when they think they can smooth over insult by sounding calm. Malcolm, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I told him we had never been on a foot together. He chuckled like I had given him a clever line. Then he said Asha was under enormous pressure, that pulling support mid-program was short-sighted, that maybe we should think man-to-man about preserving her momentum. I asked him one question. If you were the real man in the room, why are you on my phone asking me to finance your girlfriend? He went quiet for half a breath. That was enough. Then he shifted into strategy, talking about liquidity, a seed round, deals closing soon, temporary constraints. I had heard versions of this language in every sector of American life. It always meant the same thing. The image came first, the money was somewhere else. I told him he had chosen his role. Provider was part of the costume. He should wear it fully. Then I hung up before he could repair his dignity. The unraveling did not happen all at once. It happened the way real consequences do, through dates on calendars and systems that do not care about your self-image. Her card stopped working at a hotel in Manhattan during a recruiting trip. The leasing office in Chicago emailed about unpaid rent. The lender declined her request to modify the car loan without a stronger cosigner. She texted me from different numbers, each message sounding like it had been drafted in a different emotional climate. Angry, pleading, logical, wounded. I read every one and answered only once. Please communicate through email regarding shared financial matters. My mother noticed something was wrong before I told her. Mothers often do. She came by on a Sunday after church with salmon croquettes and a pound cake wrapped in foil. I was in the backyard trying to sand and repaint an old porch chair because working with my hands kept me from calling Asha. My mother stood at the back door in her camel coat and said, "You look like your spirit has a splinter." I laughed in spite of myself. We sat at the kitchen table, and I told her enough for her to understand without making myself relive every insult. She listened without interrupting, except once to ask, "That girl said what?" in a tone so flat it was almost art. When I finished, she sipped her tea and said, "A man is not made by how loudly he enters a room. Usually the loud ones are borrowing furniture from the walls." That was exactly her kind of wisdom. Strange until it settled. Then she said something more practical. Do not rescue somebody from the consequences of a choice they made looking you in the face. I wrote that sentence on an index card later and kept it in my wallet for months. Asha came down to Baltimore in May to collect the last of her things. I almost left the boxes on the porch, but in the end I stacked them in the front hall because I was raised with a minimum standard. She arrived in a rideshare, not the Honda, wearing sunglasses too big for a cloudy day. She looked thinner, tighter around the mouth, not broken, just strained. I could tell before she said a word that the luxury version of her new life had encountered actual billing cycles. She stepped inside and glanced around like the house might accuse her first. She did not apologize. Not then. Instead, she went straight to injured dignity. "You embarrass me," she said while lifting a box of winter boots. "With who?" I asked. "The landlord? The bank? Your classmates?" She set the box down and took off the sunglasses. Her eyes were red around the edges, but not from crying in front of me. "You knew I was counting on that support." "Yes," I said, "the same way you knew I was counting on honesty." She looked away at the staircase, at the framed black and white photo of my grandparents. Anywhere but my face. We ended up in the front room, because neither of us seemed willing to leave first. Rain ticked against the windows. A city bus exhaled at the corner. She said Andre was figuring some things out. I did not ask what. She volunteered anyway, as if she needed the record corrected. He had promised investor money that had not landed. He had talked like certainty and planned like vibes. She had used that phrase once to mock one of my cousins, and hearing it from her now nearly made me smile. "So he is not paying the tuition," I said. She folded her arms. "No." "And the apartment?" She hesitated. "I moved." "Where?" She gave a little bitter laugh. "Do you want a zip code too?" I said nothing. After a moment, she admitted she was subletting a room from another student in Rogers Park and taking the train farther than she liked because the place near campus was gone. Luxury life overnight. That was the piece most people would focus on, I guess. The nicer apartment, the dinners, the confidence of never checking a total before you tap your card. But standing there, I realized the deeper loss for her was not comfort. It was the illusion of elevation. She asked then, in a voice much smaller than the one she had used in my kitchen weeks before, whether I would reconsider just the final tuition installment. "It is one payment," she said. "One. I can carry the rest later." I thought about it longer than I should have. That was my third decision point, and maybe the most important. I could have paid to prove I was better than the way she treated me. People love that kind of morality in stories. But real life is not a contest in sainthood. I told her no, not because I hated her, because the lesson was already late. She nodded once, sharp and embarrassed, like she had expected refusal, but still hoped shame might do what logic could not. Then she said the one thing that almost moved me. "I did love you." I believe she meant it, too. Love just was not the strongest force in her by then. Ambition was. Image was. Restlessness was. I told her I had loved her enough to confuse support with permanence, and that was my fault to fix, not hers. She stood very still at that. The rain picked up. Somewhere down the block a siren went by and faded west. Ordinary city sounds. End of an era soundtrack. After she left with the last box, I changed the front door code and took a long walk through the neighborhood without checking my phone. Kids were playing basketball in a schoolyard with one bent rim. A man outside the corner store was arguing cheerfully about lottery numbers. Somebody had jerk chicken smoking in a drum grill in an alley lot, and the smell drifted all the way to Madison Avenue. It hit me then that I had spent a year funding somebody else's ascent while shrinking my own life around her schedule. That realization hurt worse than the cheating. It made me feel absent from myself. So I started returning, not in some dramatic rebirth way, in ordinary ways. I went back to the Saturday morning barber on Pennsylvania Avenue instead of letting my hairline fend for itself. I joined my friend Terrence for pickup games at the Y, even though my jumper had gone disrespectfully old. I refinished the porch chair. I took my niece to the aquarium because I had missed 2 of her dance recitals during Asha's first semester and needed to stop calling that supportive. Grief gets romanticized when it is really repetitive work. Eat, sleep, move your body. Do not text people who have already answered you. I heard updates through mutual friends and one nosy classmate of hers who reached out after recognizing my name from an old LinkedIn post Asha had once shared. Andre's venture never fully launched. There were branding decks, photo shoots, one-panel discussion, and endless language about disruptive ecosystems. Not much else. He and Asha lasted less than 6 months after I cut off support. I wish I could say that news thrilled me, but by then it mostly felt obvious. Relationships built on borrowed status usually wobble as soon as the bills show up. Fantasy hates invoices. Everybody should know that. Asha emailed me in December, Nearly a year after the first warning signs. No tricks, no emotional bait, just a plain subject line. I owe you an apology. I read it at my dining room table with the Christmas tree lights on and a bowl of gumbo cooling beside me. She wrote that she had confused being admired with being loved and confused being funded with being secure. She wrote that Andre had never actually wanted partnership, only proximity to whatever made him look substantial. She wrote that calling him a real man was a cheap, cruel thing said by somebody high on borrowed language. I did not answer right away. I let the email sit for 3 days because immediate responses had cost me enough already. Then I wrote back 4 sentences. I said I appreciated the apology. I said I hoped she finished a degree on terms she could respect. I said I was no longer interested in revisiting what had happened. And I said I genuinely wished her steadiness, which was harder to offer than happiness, but felt more honest. She replied with 2 words. Understood. Thank you. That was the last direct exchange we had. Sometimes closure sounds like a door clicked gently, not slammed. If this story gave you something real to think about, leave a comment with the biggest lesson you took from Malcolm's experience. Then share, and subscribe for more original relationship drama stories like this one, where loyalty, pride, and consequences all collide. I am 40 now. The blue folders are still in order. The pantry is still arranged like a man expects inspectors. And I do not apologize for that anymore. Last month, sitting in my own kitchen with oxtails on low heat and jazz humming softly from the speaker, I realized I had not thought about real man in weeks. That was how I knew I was finally free. Not because Asha lost a luxury. Not because Andre turned out hollow. But because I stopped measuring myself against an insult built to excuse somebody else's disloyalty. The life I kept was not flashy. It was mine. That turned out to be more than enough. What stays with me in this story is not Malcolm removing the card or asking for the key back. It is the smaller, harder choices afterward. Not rescuing Asha from the consequences she chose. Not letting Andre define manhood over phone. And not paying that final installment just to feel noble. Boundaries usually look cold to people who benefited from you having none. And grief gets clearer once you stop trying to win the breakup and start trying to return to yourself. The end.